Hello and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. And right now, a press conference is underway on the successful first launch of the Long March 5 rocket. Let's go there and listen in.
女士们、先生们、
Ladies and gentlemen,
记者朋友们，刚才
friends from the press,
长征系列家族喜天新成员，在大家的共同见证下，
with the witness of you all, the new generation of carrier
首次
rocket
飞行任务
Long
获得
March
圆满成功。
5's launch has been a great success.
我们召开发布会，
Hereby we hold a press conference on this launch.
国防科工局总工程师、
We have the
国家
honor
航
with
天
us
航天局秘书长田玉龙，
Mr. Tian Yulong,
运载
the
火
China
箭
Academy of
首
Launch
次飞行
Vehicle
任务发射场
Technologies.
地指挥部副总指挥长易自谦、
Mr. Yi
和长征5
Zhiqian,
号
Vice
运载火
Commander
箭
for
总
this
指挥
mission.
王觉
Mr. Wang Jue, the Chief Commander of this launch
我是国防科工局
mission.
主任李自平。
My name is Li Zhiping from the Information Office.
首先，有请国防科工局总工程师、
First,
国家航天局秘
it's
书
my
长
great honor
田玉龙
to give you
介绍
Mr.
长
Tian
征5号
Yulong
运
to
载火
brief
箭
you
工程总
on
体情况。
the general information of Long March 5 carrier rocket.
各位媒体朋友，
Friends from the press,
晚上好。
ladies and gentlemen, good evening.
刚才我们共同见证了
Just
长征
now,
5号
we
首
witnessed
飞的
together
震撼
the first launch
壮观
of the Long
和
March
令
5,
人激动的
and
时
the
刻。
picture has been a
首先我
marvelous
代表
and splendid one.
探月工程3期
Please
及
allow
长征
me
5号
to, on
火箭工
behalf
程任务指挥
of
部
all my colleagues
向媒体朋友
at the
介绍
mission
长征5号火
headquarters
箭
to introduce to you the general conditions of the Long March 5
在此呢
space，
我首先
program.
代表国防科工局、国家航
On
天局
behalf of my
感谢
bureau,
任务指挥部、军地
I want
各
to
组
pay my
成部门
tribute to all
大
the
力协
staff
同，
and professionals
联合
for your
攻关，
cooperation
奋
and
力拼搏，
efforts.
取
And
得了
thank you
这
for your
这
time
一
and
伟大
energy
成果
that you put
这也
into
是我们
this
中国
great
航天
mission.
新甲
This
子
marks
新长征
a new
新成果
milestone
站在
of
了历史的
China's
新起点。
space programs, and
大家
it
刚刚
is a
共同
new
见证了
historical
10
juncture
台发动机
for all of
同时
us.
点火的
We just
这个
witnessed
时刻，
the
托
moment
举了
when
我
10
国最
engines
大推
were
力新代
ignited
火箭
together
长征5号
and witnessed
顺利
together
升空的壮观
the
景象。
successful launch of the new
最新测空的
generation
数
of
据
carrier
显
rockets
示，长征5
lifted
号
to
搭
the
载
sky.
发射的载荷组合体在轨运
The
行正常。长征5
composite
号运载火箭
of Long
首
March
次
is
发射任务
operating in
取
space
得圆满成功。
normally, and we have declared the success of the launch of the Long March
党
5
中央、
carrier
国务院、
rocket.
中央军
The
委
Central
发
Military
来贺电，
Commission, the Central Party Committee, and the State
将
Council all
探月
send
工
us
程3期及长征5
congratulation
号运
letters,
载火箭工程任务指挥部以及参加
and
本
the letter
次
goes
任
to
务
all
的
the staff
全体科
and
技工作者、
workers working
干部
at
职
the
工
mission
和解放
headquarters
军指战
and
员
the
表
Space
示祝贺，
Program Office.
对长征5号首飞成功给予
And
了高度评价。
The
指出
highest
长
leadership
征5号
has
是
recognized
我
our
国运载
efforts
火箭
and
升
congratulate
级
us
换代
on
的
the
里程碑
successful
工程。
launch, and
创新
noted
难
that
点多，
it is an
技术
important
跨度大，
milestone in
复杂
our
程度
space
高，
program.
代表
It
了
is
我国
it
运载火箭科技
represent
创
high
新的最高水
technology
平。
and joint
其首
force
次
that
飞
is
行
put
任务的
in by all
成
of
功
our
实施，
staff.
填
This
补了我
successful
国
landing
大推力
has
无
been
毒无染液体
a
火箭发动
first
机的空白。
in our
火箭
heavy
运载能力
class
位居
carrier
我国榜首
rocket,
并
and
进
it
入
as
国
the
际先进之列，
one of the
是
most
我国
advanced
航
carrier
天大国
rocket
迈向航
worldwide,
天强国的
and it
重要
marks
标
an
志，
important step for us
为我
to
国新一
become
代运载火
a
箭
stronger
系列
nation
化、
in
型
space
化发展
program,
奠定了坚实的
and
基
it
础。
lays a solid foundation
为
for
后
further
续
development of
探月工程
China's
3期、
space program
载人航
and
天、
also lunar
火星探测
programs
等国
and
家重
Mars
大科技专
program.
项和重大工程的实施，
These are
提
all
供了
major
有力的
programs
保
in
障。
China's astronautic
长
sciences.
征5号是我
The
国
Long
运载
March
火箭
5
升级换
mission
代的里
is
程
a
碑
new
工程，
generation
作
and
为
a
新代
milestone
火
for
箭
our
系列
carrier
的基本型。
rocket.
长
It
征
is
5号
a
代表了
basic
我国运载火
prototype.
箭科技水平的最高水平，实现了5米直径大舰体的设计能力， 仿真手弹、
It is
加工制
5
造以
meters in
及各
diameter
种地面综合实验的巨大
and
跨越，
has
工程
realized a lot
共
of
突破了
leapfrog improvements.
12大项200多项关键核心技术，火箭新技术比例远超国际水平。
It has represent a lot of high technologies
火箭
of
总体
world
构型
class.
与总体优化设计技术先行大推力。
You've been watching an ongoing press conference in Hainan province talking about the successful launch of the Long March 5 rocket in China. The rocket was launched 2 hours earlier. And you're watching World Insight on CCTV News. Myanmar State Councilor Aung San Suu Kyi arrived in Tokyo yesterday for talks with Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. This is Suu Kyi's first trip to Japan since becoming her country's de facto leader earlier this year. Here's a look at what exactly happened.
Mr. Kyi's first official visit to Japan, after previous visit to Laos, Thailand, China, the UK, the US and India. Aung San Suu Kyi met with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Tokyo on Wednesday, after which Abe promised Japan's support for Myanmar's development and peace progress.
We will provide $7.7 billion to Myanmar through the Japan-Myanmar Cooperation Program, including aid for regions with minorities. This is to contribute to industrial and regional development of Myanmar.
About 5% of the Japanese aid will be directed towards supporting ethnic minorities in this Southeast Asian nation. Japanese officials said the rest will be spent on areas such as airports and electricity projects. In the past half-decade, the number of Japanese companies in Myanmar has multiplied 5 times over, and Japan poured billions of dollars into industrial and social programs in Myanmar.
We have received a lot of aid from Japan for our democratization and peacemaking efforts.
Since becoming the de facto leader of Myanmar in April, Aung San Suu Kyi has toured many major powers. Some analysts say Myanmar is trying to find a balance between different powers and figure out its own way of developing bilateral and multilateral relations on the global stage.
And for more on Aung San Suu Kyi's visit to Japan in Beijing, we have Mr. Song Qing-ren, who's an associate professor of the Institute of Southeast Asian and Oceanian Studies from the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations. Joining us in Tokyo, we have Professor Takasato Watanabe, Professor Emeritus at Doshisha University. Joining us from Washington, D.C. in the U.S., we are having Ambassador Priscilla Clapp, who is a former chief of mission at the U.S. Embassy in Myanmar and now a senior advisor to the U.S. Institute of Peace. Welcome to the three of you. Of course, I would like to begin from our Japanese scholar, Professor Watanabe. What do you make of the billions of dollars development aid that the Abe administration committed to Myanmar, and also the Japanese business community willing to establish and try to build the industrial Myanmar economic zone there?
So far, United States has been talking directly to Japan not to invest much money to Myanmar because they don't want to have the Myanmar to be developed in that area. However, the United States has changed the policy, and then Abe administration, with the economic circles of Japan, started to have the complete planning how to develop the society of Myanmar. And Myanmar also wanted to have the domestic stability and also the investment from other countries. Abe wants to follow the idea of the United States. So this is the first point. The second point is that in Myanmar, to have the stability inside the country, it is so many opposed people, especially the minority people, are not happy to be under the control of the big power, big economic power of the Yangon or other areas. So if we invest much money to those non-developed areas of inside Myanmar, both Myanmar people and Japanese investors are happy.
All right, let me go to Ms. Clapp. What do you make of it? I mean, how important is Japan going to be in Myanmar's, particularly Ms. Suu Kyi's administration's overall plan about its economic development and also its role inside Asia, its diplomacy as well?
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here. Japan is tremendously important to Myanmar. This is not new. Japan has been investing there. They've already provided billions in aid and loans to the country since the transition began 5 or 6 years ago. And this is just the latest installment. The aid, the JICA aid, has been running at about $1 billion a year for several years now. So this 7.7 billion that Prime Minister Abe is adding will stretch over a period of about 5 years. It's very substantial. It is probably one of the most substantial grant aid programs from foreign governments. But Japanese investment in the country is also extremely important. They have put together the first economic zone in the country, a special economic zone right outside of Yangon. And they are investing, as Prime Minister Abe said, in infrastructure, which is desperately needed in the country.
Right.
And there are very few others that are actually making that kind of investment.
Of course, for a country as Myanmar is, it needs all kinds of development aid, support, as well as investment coming from the business communities around the world. Mr. Song, the interesting thing is, how does Myanmar play Japan in its overall plan? We've seen Ms. Suu Kyi's choices of visiting countries started with Thailand, which is closest neighbor, then China, UK, United States, and then Japan. What do you make, India of course, in front of Japan. What do you make of this itinerary choice in a way to indicate Ms. Suu Kyi's thoughts about Japan's position for Myanmar, diplomatically speaking, economically speaking?
Yeah. Now we can see that Aung San Suu Kyi and the LD government's diplomacy pay much attention to the neighboring countries, Thailand or ASEAN countries or China or India, and it wants to get the support from the neighboring countries too much. Second, I think Aung San Suu Kyi and LD government also knows clearly that they had to expand, develop good relations with all of the countries, including Japan, United States, or Britain, or Australia, or other countries in the world. It wants to get more support to economically, politically, and diplomatically support to boost Myanmar's economy, to promote Myanmar's international role in the world stage, and also to improve the Myanmar people's well-being.
Ms. Clapp, the same question I guess have to be addressed to you. The choices that Ms. Suu Kyi made in terms of the specific design of her itinerary to indicate the country's importance and where the countries are in her overall map for Myanmar's future. Ms. Clapp.
I suppose one could look at it that way, but these kinds of visits have to be sequenced. You can't do them all at once. And I think that some of it was just a question of timing. For example, she came to the United States in order to appear at the UN General Assembly, so that dictated the fact that she would come to the U.S. in September. I think it was convenient for her to come to the U.S. through Europe and make a stop there. So you can't say that the trips were sequenced simply to indicate the importance of the relations. I think that the fact you're making of trying to maintain a balance among all of the great powers is a traditional foreign policy of Myanmar, and we're going to see this return to the traditional balance that they've always had.
Right.
It got a bit skewed during the military years because of the of the Western sanctions on the country.
Ms. Clapp, on the other hand, you also see Ms. Suu Kyi being caught between two issues. One, of course, is the appeal Myanmar has since the first wonderful election that everybody applauded around the world, with Ms. Suu Kyi coming into power as well. On the other hand, Ms. Suu Kyi and many of her colleagues had to answer about the questions between her party and also the minorities in the north, the peace and stability there, and how they are treating the minorities once they are coming into power. And of course, there's another issue, which is how can they make sure the countries that they are dealing with are going to contribute to the Myanmar's development as one, because countries are having different kinds of agendas in the region and beyond. So, Ms. Clapp, I know you have been very close interactions with Ms. Suu Kyi before she came into power. What is your take about this balance Ms. Suu Kyi needs really to?
Well, I think that she is looking at the country's needs. She has given priority to the peace process. She is deeply engaged with the ethnic minority groups, trying to move the country towards a stable future. It has been one of the longest running civil wars in the world, and it really needs to focus on that. That has been neglected in the past. Second, she wants to promote economic development. The people expect the NLD government to bring them better quality of life. And so she's, the most recent visits, as we have seen, where she's been appealing to donor nations, have been focused particularly on economic development. That was certainly the theme of her visit to the United States.
Right. Professor Watanabe, I want to end up our discussion with a question for you. You see very clearly Ms. Suu Kyi and her administration really wants to develop what they call strategic diplomacy. That is, they try to keep a balance among all powers, even those that might have at odds with one another in the region. So, Japan, what kinds of nature of relationship is Tokyo, particularly the Abe administration, do you think, willing to develop with Myanmar, with Yangon at this moment?
Abe administration is very strange because they don't have any concrete ideas how to develop other countries, especially in the nation like Myanmar. However, the economic circles, especially middle-sized economic entities of Japan, they want to make factories in Myanmar utilizing the low-wage system of Myanmar. This is very important for them, and also the media in Japan are suggesting that if we can give the strong suppliers from Myanmar every direction, we should put money on the educational system for Myanmar people. These are very important for us and also for them.
All right. It seems that Professor Watanabe have a different view compared to the Abe administration. But anyway, before we go, Mr. Song, very brief question for you. China, how does China take it? Myanmar-Japan relations at this stage, briefly.
Yeah. China wants to have a friendly relations with Myanmar, and also I think Japan wants to compete with China in Myanmar for its influence with China, but China doesn't want to compete with Japan about the influence in Myanmar. I think my view is we should make China, Myanmar, and Japan or other countries should make the cake to become bigger and bigger to benefit all of us.
Well, we'll see if that is the case. Priscilla Clapp, Takasato Watanabe, Song Qingren, thank you so much, the three of you, for being with us. Thank you. And you're watching World Insight. We'll be back after this. Are they game changers?
And with the hateful and divisive campaign that he has run.
He's got tremendous hatred.
When they go low, you go high.
Well, well, well. But these millennials are. We are. Rising Voices. Get a glimpse of tomorrow's young leaders. What are the issues that interest you the most?
Trying to find a common enemy abroad.
China-US relations.
It's going to hurt China and also hurt the United States.
As they join us to unravel the U.S. election wranglings. Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump.
So I think Trump has been an outlier in this election.
We call them now populists.
Election breakdown on World Insight. Thursday, November 3rd, is the 70th anniversary of Japan's pacifist constitution, which Prime Minister Shinzo Abe hopes to revise. However, a recent poll by Japan's Kyodo News Agency shows more than half of the Japanese public are opposed to the revisions.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been lobbying to emasculate and revise the country's war-renouncing constitution. But 7 decades after the publication of its pacifist constitution, a recent nationwide poll suggests a peaceful existence is preferred. Analysts say people remain wary of Abe's motives.
World War II brought a tragic disaster to China. In total, 20 million people died in Asia, including 3.1 million Japanese. Since then, people have truly seen the evil side of the war and made sure there are no future wars. That's why the concept of a constitution has been deeply engraved in people's mind for 70 years. It has become a flag.
Abe and his ruling Liberal Democratic Party are now mulling over whether to hold a referendum in 2017 and realise the first ever amendment of the country's supreme law. However, a controversial new security law took effect in March. The law allows Japan's self-defense forces to engage in overseas combat and gives them more freedom to use weapons. And Japan is also contemplating sending peacekeepers to South Sudan. With gradual advances in freeing up the self-defense forces, Hirai is afraid the consequences may be grave.
We think the mere existence of the self-defense forces violates Article 9 of the Constitution. Many people believe the forces can provide assistance during disasters and repel aggression, so they recognize them. But even these people who believe the SDF's role is only limited to defense think Japan should never launch attacks or use forces overseas.
Analysts also say amending the pacifist constitution will damage relations with Japan's neighbours and even destabilise the region.
And for more on the 70th anniversary of Japan's pacifist constitution in Beijing, once again we have Mr. Song Qing-ren, and also in Tokyo, Japan, we are joined by Professor Takasato Watanabe. Welcome back, gentlemen. Professor Watanabe, this is an important date, but the revision will be a revision. And therefore, what's next? Many would ask about Japan.
Japanese people, especially young mothers with the babies, and also the teachers and senior people who have the memories of the very, very serious damages of the war, they are against the war, and also more than half of those people are against the Abe administration. However, the younger generation and also the workers for the bigger enterprises, they want to have the economic benefit from the activities of the Japanese government leading, you see, directions. So Japan is divided. When I left Kyoto this morning, there were so many demonstrations against the constitutional division by Abe administration.
I see.
More than 60% in the Japanese public opinion is against that. So the division between Abe's supporting people and the against people are so great now.
Okay.
So Abe is afraid to put the opinion first.
Okay. Mr. Song, the division has been clearly illustrated by Professor Takasato Watanabe, but the question is, it's going to go ahead, and what would that mean for Japan-China relations, or China-Japan?
Yeah, I think most of the Japanese people wants peace, a peace for Japan, and also China wants a peace for Japan. So China doesn't want to see the Abe government or other governments to revise the peace constitution, because if Japan revises the constitution, it will be dangerous for Japan and also its neighbors or the regional neighbors.
But then it seems that's a decision already being made.
Yeah.
And we'll see to what degree, and also how does China make up its possible impact? How is China going to prepare for a very different Japan?
Yeah, I think it's a very serious problem to China, because Japan is a very some kind of to some extent powerful neighbor to China, and also in this region. So if Japan wants to use its forces abroad, very frankly, not only in Asia or other, but also in other regions, I think both China and also other Asian countries or countries in other regions will be cautious about this.
Well, there, of course, has been a history issue that has not been resolved. Having said that, Professor Watanabe, what do you make of it? I mean, there is a joint military exercise between the United States and Japan, which is called the King's War 17, 2 weeks of military exercises. Some say it is preparing Japanese forces for its more independent operations. Others say it is just one of those routine ones. That is always an interesting issue, isn't it? That is, what is the role of the United States? Well, Japan has decided its revision of its constitution, and whether U.S. will be, in a way, cautious together with others in Asia-Pacific region about Japan's next step of development.
There are two ways of understanding of this issue, but the same common understanding of this issue is that United States getting down and down globally, so some parts of the United States want to make Japan or Japanese military power stronger against the China, North Korea, in the place of the United States. This is the first one. However, the people of Japan, when it comes to the war, when it comes to the revision of the constitution, they are very delicate. So the Abe administration is hiding this issue behind in the election campaigns. So, but now he got the more power in the diet, so he might go into the taboos of this. I think this is very dangerous for all the countries in Asia.
Well, allies or not, that has always been the most important issue between Japan and the United States, and to what extent. So if Japan taking a very different direction, what is your expectation, Mr. Song, of the United States, for example? And how will China look at U.S.-Japan interactions during this process?
Yeah, now the U.S.-Japan ally is becoming more and more active in this region, and I think now, just as the Japan professor said, that the U.S. economy or its influence is declining, and also so it wants to encourage Japan to, especially the military forces, to be active in this region or in the world to help the U.S. States to keep its hegemony in the world. So I think, and also to help the U.S. to continue to balance China's rise in this region, to help the U.S. States to deal with the North Korea issue. So I think in the future, the Japan, the military forces will be much more active in the future.
Well, we'll see how China will react to that, if that really happens as you predict. Yeah. Thank you so much, Song Qingrun, Takasato Watanabe. Really appreciate, gentlemen, for being with us. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program. Canadian architect Douglas King's flowing designs famously blend with the landscape. In our exclusive interview, he talks about how his Aboriginal heritage shaped his career. Welcome back. You're watching World Insight, coming to you Monday to Friday, every day. The culture of Native American Indians, who prefer to be called the Aboriginals of North America, is now part of public awareness again, following the efforts of many activists. Among them is Douglas Cardinal, a top Canadian architect who grew up in the Aboriginal tribes. Earlier, I sat down with him when he visited Beijing to talk about how he instills his Aboriginal heritage into his designs. He shared the connection between his native blood, natural sensibility, and his fabulous works. Before our exclusive interview, take a look at Cardinal himself and his architectural masterpieces.
Natives in the America land. The indigenous peoples of the Americas used to be forced into a corner by European colonists. Now, more and more people are devoted to protecting Native Americans' ancient culture. Douglas Cardinal is one of them. As Canada's best-known architect, his projects are famous for showing his Aboriginal heritage. Born of German and Algonquin heritage, Cardinal has always embraced his native cultural and aesthetic values. As primary design architect for the National Museum of the American Indian, Cardinal's curvilinear designs represent the nurturing female forms of Mother Earth. His Ujibugumu village layout, centering in the traditional Shaptuan and open to the four compass directions, has collected ideas from the local community. The Canadian Museum of Civilization, now renamed as the Canadian Museum of History, remains the most prominent example of Cardinal's style, a building rooted in the surrounding natural world with a distinctly native sensibility.
Well, I was thinking of the Rocky Mountains that are the backbone of the continent, and they became the backbone of my design. And then in the Ottawa River and the waters and glaciers of the mountains, I saw how nature and water carved those rocks to form those forms. And so I looked at the building in that way, that if it was to express Canada, it should express the land itself, the rivers, the mountains, the rocks, and also the forms. But also I wanted to combine it with forms of man and nature, because I wanted to say to the people, as my message as an artist was, unless we live in harmony, in balance with the land, we will have no future.
Now think about it. Everybody would agree with you. Then, decades ago, this is quite a new idea.
Well, that's the difference. The elders kept their knowledge in the mountains, kept it away from being colonized or changed. And I was trained by the elders in the mountains.
We have to tell who the elders are.
They're the books of knowledge of our Aboriginal people.
How long were you with them?
15 years.
Wow.
Basically working with him, Robert Smallboy and Raymond Harris. I remember his teachings that all life had to be respected, and that that we're a part of all living things, that we're not from nature, that we are nature. Whatever we do to ourselves and to our environment affects all life. He also said that we are the grandchild of all the generations that came before us. We're the grandfather of all the generations that come after us. Within us is the past, the present, and future. So whatever we do, we have to be responsible to our ancestors and to all the future generations. That is our responsibility.
You were born with a German mother and a Canadian Indian father.
Yeah.
You lived in the community with your parents, matriarchal society, but later you were trained the well-established Western style.
Yeah.
And what does this combination mean to you, both life and profession?
My mother felt that, for one thing, that I should have a very good education, and so did my father, because he realized that with a good education, you have freedom to be anywhere in the world. Indeed, though, I was, in a sense, spent most of my education in a convent, because they wanted me to be separate from society in a way and learn all about the arts and all the culture and architecture and music and all the arts, so that I could be able to have two worlds, have the beauty of the indigenous community and the beauty of the Western world, and to be able to combine those knowledges together to create a new way of thinking.
Later you became a very well-known architect, and you did serve the Aboriginal community a lot. For example, one project you did, which is called Ojibugumo Village. I just tried to learn to pronounce it right. Tell us about that design, because you seem to have a huge team of consultants.
Well, they called me up and asked me if I could help them. The chief, actually.
The chief of the village.
The chief of the village.
The Aboriginal village.
Yeah, the Aboriginal village. He says, could you help us? We want to design a village, and they lived in nothing, tar paper shacks, they had nothing.
How many of them?
We had 500-600 people.
And then you did your presentation.
Yes, and I encouraged them to criticize. At first they said, oh no, how can we criticize? Look at all your degrees and everything. We don't know anything about planning. And I said, in your hearts, you know it all. You know what's right for your people. And you're not going to hurt me by criticizing me. You'll hurt me if you don't. And so they all got up, and then they were like piranhas. They just tore me to shreds. So I wrote everything down, and that was new knowledge. And they were teaching me. I had a lot to learn.
What did they teach you? Something you still remember today?
Well, they taught me that they wanted a village to be in a circle with a center in the circle. They wanted it open to the 4 directions because they wanted to relate, to bring in their ceremonies in the center. They taught me that they wanted the shape of their village to be like their past villages, so they could bring in the ceremonies. They taught me that they wanted to be able to build it themselves so that they could create jobs and opportunities for their own people. They taught me how much they respect and love their children, that their school had to be designed around their children. So many things I learned from them. And all this had to be reflected in the design. And so they would criticize me and give me all this new information. I'd go back to my office, redesign it. And then they were on trips, like had a goose break, so they were out hunting goose. They're out hunting moose. So I had to go out and drive out where they're hunting moose. Because I had
following all their hunting trips.
Yeah, their hunting trips and everything, because they wanted their village right away, but also they had to feed themselves and follow their traditions.
So 7 or 8 times?
8 times.
Did you revisit it again?
Oh, all the time. We just finished a few years ago building them a whole museum to enshrine their language and their people. And they have programs in the Museum of Civilization, now called a Museum of History, to be able to help them manage their collections and preserve their collections for the future of all Canadians.
You also try to do a gigantic project in the United States with their invitation. The National Museum of American Indians. It's not an easy job to begin with.
Well, it was harder in the United States to do that because it was the last site on the mall in Washington.
Yes, indeed.
Their most prized site. But it was actually an amazing experience, you know, to be there.
Yeah.
And we had elders from all over the Americas come, 30 elders, and they developed a vision.
30 elders of the American Indian community.
Right across the Americas, even Mexico, South America,
wow,
North America, Canada, and
into Washington, D.C. to have meetings with you.
Yes, yes. We met at the Cosmos Club, the most important club there. All these indigenous people flew in. Some even had their headdresses. They were not even, that was the first time they came out of their villages.
Yes.
And
did they trust you?
Oh yes, 4 days, night and day, it was their vision. Because my job is to bring people's visions into reality. National Museum American Indian was their vision. You know.
You really provided the architectural design of the National American Indians in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Later, there were a lot of zigzagging in the overall cooperation. Now, when you reflect back, what came into your mind?
Did I step back? The important thing is that the building is there. And it still reflects the vision of the Aboriginal people of the Americas. That's the important thing. Now, things were a little bit lost.
From your original design?
Yeah, but
for example, the very top of the building.
Yeah, it was cut back because the architect from New York who took over the project didn't have the technical knowledge to solve the problem.
Was it a pity to you?
Yes, of course. I mean, I wanted to make sure the vision of the elders was the most beautiful thing in Washington. It's like our Aboriginal people in the last couple of hundred years, we've been badly bruised. So the building then is a reflection of that. And there's not much you can do it. It's truly an expression of the way it is. So we're looking at that monument. Yes, it's bruised, but so are people's hearts bruised.
It's not just architectural designs, it's also politics. It's also relationship with the investors. It's also what's going to be the impact of the architecture. Eventually, it came into being. You, as an Aboriginal architect yourself, you have to deal with all of these.
You just have to believe in the goodness of people. So you talk to people heart to heart. I mean, most people have big egos, and you know, and sometimes one's head interferes with one's communication. But when you're speaking from here, you can communicate with anyone.
That's Douglas Cardinal, one of the most well-known architects of his generation from North America. He certainly has his roots in the Aboriginal cultures where he comes from. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of our program, visit our website. Just type World Insight CCTV News into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again tomorrow for a special program of World Insight. You're going to see more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.